Would you like to feel a greater sense of belonging at work and create an environment where other people feel like they belong as well? This is the Happier at Work podcast. It's the career and culture podcast for people first leaders. I'm your host, Aoife O'Brien, the career and culture strategist for commercial leaders and teams. And my guest today is Dr. Beth Kaplan, and we talk all about redefining belonging at work. What does belonging really mean? We dig into the below the surface and we get into how do we actually define it and how do we feel this greater sense of belonging at work. I really know you're going to enjoy today's episode. I would love to know at the end what's one thing that you're going to do differently. We're here for action rather than inspiration. So don't be afraid to get involved and let me know in the comments on LinkedIn. Let me know on your favorite podcast platform what's one thing that you're going to do differently after listening to today's episode. Beth, you're so welcome to the Happier at Work podcast. I'm so excited for our conversation today. Do you want to let listeners know a little bit about you, your journey to date, and what has you occupied these days? What are you most interested in?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone out there. I'm Dr. Beth Kaplan, and I am one of the world's leading belonging experts. I study belonging and human connection, on top of the fact that I'm a very proud mom of boys, live in a house of all boys, and in Newtown, Pennsylvania, so the East Coast of the United States. And as I mentioned, I'm a belonging researcher. And I didn't really set out to study belonging. However, like most researchers who study their own trauma, I set out to understand why so many people, myself included, felt like they had to prove their worth just to exist in certain spaces.
Hmm.
So the more I researched, the clearer it became. Belonging was this complex concept that everyone thought was easy, but had their own definition of it. Some thought it was attachment, some membership. People even described as fitting in. So I redefined it myself, and I look at belonging as the innate desire to be part of something larger than ourselves without sacrificing who we are.
I love that definition. Can I just say,
Yeah.
absolutely love it. And I think you're so right. I think we maybe confuse it with things like this sense of fitting in. I want to fit in, or
Yeah.
I want to be part of a group. But I love
Yeah.
how it's kind of, there's a few different elements to how you describe it, and it's not sacrificing who we actually are as a person.
Right.
And talk to me a little bit about that evolution. So when you first started looking into this, what drove you to look into it in the first place? And what are some of the things that you thought maybe at the start,
Mhm.
but maybe the further you looked into it, like actually that's not the case at all?
So I would say my journey really started probably from as early on as I can remember. I'm always the person that brought people together. It gives me extreme joy to build community. Um, but I always felt a little bit like an outsider,
Mm,
even in the communities that I built. And then, of course, growing up, our first set of leaders are our parents. And for me, learning those behavioral patterns and all the different things that they installed was what continued on from school into the workplace. So for many of us, that's what happens, good or bad. We really do see our bosses as those figures that give us structure and order. And had a very happy career until I didn't, with a boss that just I didn't mesh with very well,
mm,
who would praise me in public and then behind the scenes would really give me a very hard time. And all I wanted to do was win him over. All I wanted
mm.
was gold stars.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't going to happen. So that's the long story short. It's all in the book. You
Okay.
can read all about there. But I got very curious to understand why I was this, high achiever on paper, outstanding performer, and I was just desperately lonely and unhappy.
Mm,
And so about a year after I had a performance review with my boss where he said some pretty disparaging things,
mm.
and I
That's
took his word
that's what I was going to
for
ask you about
everything.
actually.
Yeah,
Whether so in public he was praising you and then privately
awards.
he wasn't, but
Yeah,
that was to your face as opposed to behind your back.
it was a mixture of everything,
Okay,
unfortunately.
wow, yeah.
So no, I would get awards in public, and
Mm.
then I would hear things, and he would send people to do certain things, um, and I couldn't understand why he was almost competing with me in certain zones.
Okay.
But instead of remembering who I am and what I bring to the table, his perception became my reality
Mm.
to such a dangerous level where I stopped sleeping as much. My hair was falling out. I was gaining weight. And the more and more I looked into why this was happening, there were very little answers for me. And I would do things like go to HR or employee relations, and nothing seemed to be getting better. So I was honest with him and I came clean. I wasn't just figuratively killing myself in the workplace, I was suicidal. I really
Wow.
was. And so stigmatized by the fact that I was feeling so badly about something I felt was trivial, the workplace and trauma. I wasn't, saving cats or trees or performing surgeries, but I felt desperate. And when I told him that I was suicidal, his response was, and verbatim, so sorry, I have another meeting to get to.
Oh, wow.
So it was right then and there that I realized I stopped mattering to myself. I did.
Mm.
And you can't belong to something greater until you belong to yourself first.
Yeah.
So I quit. A job that I loved very much, by the way. It was only him that I really had a hard time with. And I went to grad school, and my dissertation kind of became my personal rewrite of everything going on.
Mm.
I decided I wanted to understand why people like me, like I said, didn't feel worthy to be in the spaces they were in.
Mm.
And to your earlier question, no, no one agreed with me, almost ever. So it was an uphill battle in grad school because I would say things like the opposite of belonging, and people would say is exclusion. And I would just kind of scratch my head and say to myself, well, but inclusion and belonging aren't the same things. They're not. They may elicit certain feelings that feel similar, but they're not. So
Mm.
why would exclusion be that? And the great thing is that grad school kind of built me up to understand what the differences were. And it was really became, in my opinion, became up to me to clarify that and to bring some new research to the world.
Brilliant. I love that.
Yeah.
And I love this idea that you mentioned about belonging to yourself first,
Yes.
because it
Yeah.
sounds like, I mean, I love how you describe it. Like you put all of your worth essentially into this manager
Yes. I
who
did.
wasn't giving you what you really needed. And
Yes.
you lost yourself in that.
Did.
And you were like, okay, so I must be completely unworthy because this other person doesn't believe in me. And I'd love to jump forward now that you
Yeah.
have, you're looking back, you've got 2020 vision. What was actually going on there?
Um, that's a really great question. I think in hindsight, I think that he felt competitive with me.
Hmm.
And I don't think he was in it to coach and grow me. I think he was tolerating me. The thing is, I've gone back in my head many, many times. Unfortunately, I would love to tell everyone out there that you stop thinking about those bosses, but
Mm.
we carry that trauma with us up to 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
If you're able to get in under that time frame, wonderful, brilliant for you. Um, I think that we were at a point where his only job was really to care about me. And I'm not talking about, you know, in a thoughtful manner, which should be done anyway, but to
Mm.
advocate for me, to give me candid feedback. And I don't think that that's what he wanted to do. Because truthfully, if he would have shown me care, even if he didn't even mean it, I probably would have stayed.
Mm.
So I do believe that it was a struggle I was finding with myself that he happened to be the star in my show, right?
Yeah.
And I should also have been the star in his, and I don't think that's what was happening. I think that
Okay. Yeah.
instead of bringing out the best in others, I think he was kind of like, I don't really want her on this team. And instead of
Yeah.
moving me or doing anything else, it just fell apart.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a couple of things that are kind of coming up for me now with that. Was he like that with others? Is one of the kind of first questions. Like, was it just
Yeah.
you, or was it with other people as well? And this idea of how he's behaving is not a reflection on you. You can see that now,
Mm.
but it's really a
Now,
reflection on him and what's going on for him, that he feels like he's unworthy, that he needs to be competitive or whatever it is.
that's right. So I will tell you, now looking back, I have a lot of empathy for him. And I think that shocks people when I say it.
Mm.
I don't want the worst for him. I want the best for him. I don't ever assume to understand what he was going through or was going on, but the end result is as a leader, you should be willing to meet people where they're at because we all get into that to bring out the best in others. No
Mm.
one goes into it ready to mess someone's life up.
Yeah.
But when those signs were there, he did have a responsibility to keep me healthy,
Mm.
right? Because if the workplace is able to say, we are the destination for belonging, which many do, and we will provide you with safety, it's not just psychological or physical, it should be both.
Yeah.
So in hindsight, I understand that now. Um, do I think I would have spoken truth to power? Looking back, probably not. I was
Mm.
desperately uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think what I've learned from that is while the leader has the biggest influence in our sense of belonging in the workplace, and that's not going to change, as employees, there are certain things that we can do to minimize the impact on the rest of our lives. Like for me, I probably would have tried to observe him more and absorb less.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always say, in hindsight, if I would have absorbed less of his emotions and stopped really focusing on the positive as much as the negative, which is very hard to do, by the way. Someone tells you you're wonderful and you feel valued, you want to feel good about that.
Yeah.
If I would have just taken everything he said with a grain of salt, or literally said, okay, great, he loves this, move on. He doesn't love this, move on. I think it would have been a healthier environment for all of us.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
no, it
That.
wasn't just me, by the way. There were
Yeah.
people. I could probably,
Okay, yeah, yeah. But that
yeah,
you don't become overly reliant on that external
that's
validation.
right.
Again, this idea of coming back to yourself and being like, okay, what is it that I stand for? And that's great that he liked that. Okay, let's move on to this next thing.
Yes.
And I suppose on a maybe on a broader context, why is it that you think that so many people feel this sense that they don't belong? Like you say, maybe high achievers,
Mhm.
everything looks amazing on paper, but actually we have this underlying sense that I'm a bit of an outsider, don't really belong here.
So I think what people go through is super interesting. We're all hardwired for deep human connection.
Hmm.
However, what happens is we go through this phase that unfortunately follows through our life where we don't necessarily feel worthy of it.
Hmm.
And in the workplace, that's almost become a universal experience that we don't necessarily feel worthy of that connection, even though we want it so badly. And then what happens is fear takes over. And fear is one of the hardest emotions to suppress. It really is. Fear is built in for our survival just as much as connection is at this point. However, what we're surviving is different, right? We're not surviving the elements like we may have
Hmm.
when fear really started to get ingrained into human DNA. Same thing with belonging. Belonging has also changed, where we used to find it in religious or family or in community,
Yeah.
changed quite a bit.
Hmm.
And I do firmly believe that people now look to the workplace for a lot of those things. It's where we
Yeah.
do spend the most amount of time.
Absolutely, yeah, 100% agree with that. And I was chatting with someone a number of years ago about that. And it is that idea that maybe we used to go to church on Sundays and find a real sense of connection and belonging when we spend time in those places. And like you say, with our families. But since we spend so much of our time at work,
Yes.
not only are we seeking it out there, but we have this expectation that we're going to find it there as well.
That's right. Oh my
Mm.
goodness, completely. Just like, I mean, I will tell you, I was absolutely one of those people that was tickled pink to be in a company whose value was family.
Mm.
Family, especially for me coming from maybe not the most positive family backgrounds, was so attractive to
Yeah.
be with a group of people that were going to embrace me that way. Little by little, though, you learn that that's not really possible because you don't give benefits to your family like you do in the workplace. And on the other end, we can't fire family,
Yeah.
right? So you can't really be loyal to something that can't be loyal back. And I think that's one of the distinguishing factors that companies are trying to embrace, but is really negatively impacting the workforce.
Okay, yeah. So on the one hand, we're saying, yeah, it's like family here. And I have seen,
Yeah.
like, I've been in an organization where I felt like it was family. I felt
Yes,
so included and it was so nice. And the only way I probably would describe it is family. But I see it being used in lots of different ways. And then I see people being really derogatory about it, saying, oh, it's like, this is not a family because exactly like you say, you can't fire your family or,
Right.
and then I saw something, I think it was just earlier today actually, that was like, okay, the next time someone says this company's like a family and you don't want to do something, you were like, you're not my mom, or,
Exactly. Exactly. But
you
that's
have
it.
to retaliate against this kind of stuff. So we're seeking out these
Yeah.
kinds of things in the workplace. We're not necessarily finding it. What is the secret then to having this sense of belonging? If this is what we're looking for, if this is so connected to that sense of deep human connection, we're seeking it out in the workplace, but actually, well, maybe rather than talking about what the solutions are, what are the big barriers that are getting in the way?
I think that everyone assumes belonging is an all or nothing concept. I think that's a
Okay.
really hard one for people. You
Yeah.
belong and you don't. But that's not necessarily true. Um, I always like to use the gym analogy. It's such a great way of thinking about it. I belong to three physical fitness places. I go to one because I see camaraderie with the women that I work out with who are just phenomenal people.
Yeah.
I go to another one because a personal trainer focuses on me only. And then the other one I don't go to, let's be honest. So I have a deeper connection to some than others, and
Mm.
belonging is the same. You may feel a deep sense of connection to your boss or your company and not the team,
Yeah.
or the team, the company, and not your boss.
Mm.
So it's not all or nothing. And it's important to understand how those communities fit into your life and against your values.
Mm.
Here's the thing, all day long, we are asking ourselves the same question: who am I and where do I belong?
Mm.
So understanding what that response is and the space in between is incredibly important. I don't know about you. I've been in plenty of places where I get there, I know I don't belong, and I stay anyway.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
it's not serving
100%.
you, it's
Yeah.
not serving me.
Mm.
So understanding who you are and where you belong, or if you want to belong, is key.
Mm.
The other thing is, when I say belonging is not all or nothing, there are multiple types of belonging.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's understanding where you fall in that spectrum. So the way I've defined it is really there are four. There are true belonging, which is what everyone thinks about. That happy, rewarding feeling where you belong to something greater without sacrificing who you are. The opposite of that is a thwarted sense of belonging where we don't feel it.
Okay.
And that could be quite dangerous. The reality for that is that belonging is an antecedent to suicide. So when
Wow.
people don't feel like they have more to offer the world, or don't feel like they can be themselves to such an extreme point, that can become very dangerous. And the other two, which run rampant in the workplace and other parts of life, by the way, are sacrificial belonging. So sacrificing a part of yourself, consciously or subconsciously,
Mm.
for the greater good, which
Yeah.
is really where we see a lot of people get trapped in the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, if I work longer over my PTO, I will get a raise, or someone will include me more,
Mm.
or I'll get access. And the thing is, the spoiler on that one, it never works out well. It always
Mm.
catches up with people. Okay. So if you're out there and you're thinking, do I have it or not? You want to think about the type of sacrifice and if it's really noble or not.
Mm.
8 out of 10 times it's not.
Yeah. I love
And
that.
then perhaps my favorite is dissimulated belonging. It really is. Dissimulated belonging does not mean that you are not able to achieve a sense of belonging. It just means that you're not feeling a sense of belonging within the context of where you are. So you may be in the workplace and feel either a minimal sense of belonging or enough to get through because you want to get your job done, but your personal life may be so much more beneficial and exciting to you that you put up with work to get through with the rest. And
Mm.
why that's difficult is the workplace values our corporate cheerleaders, right? They want everyone to be happy and represented in the company. I would challenge that we need more culture ads more than cultural ambassadors, because
Mm.
you want people to bring diversity of thought into the workplace as well. Dissimulated belongers have a very happy sense of being. It's just not necessarily all of their eggs in the work basket.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah,
they don't place all of the emphasis, I suppose, on I have to find my sense of belonging in the workplace. They can actually get that outside of work, kind of going back to what you
that's
said,
right.
Beth, feeling that sense of connection and belonging with the ladies that you go and exercise with
That's
at the
right.
gym. Yeah, so that's kind of a little bit
That's
different.
right.
Yeah. Um,
Mhm.
Another thing that's kind of coming up for me when you're talking about things like the sacrifices that we make,
Yes,
and for me, I'm seeing this linking back to fear, and the fear
yes,
that we're not enough, the fear that we don't belong, all of these kinds
yeah.
of things. And I'm making a leap then to say, is this related in some way then to imposter syndrome? And like I feel I need to compensate in some way in order to
Yes.
feel like I'm enough, in order to feel like I deserve this.
It can. I mean, so imposter syndrome and feeling like you're not worthy of something that people feel that you are
Hmm.
can be tricky. It
Yeah.
absolutely can. And I think as a result, we do things like cover, which is this concept that refers to the way individuals downplay or hide parts of their identity to fit
Yeah.
into, the dominant norms that we face, like the workplace or public settings. Um, whereas covering is where we hide. In imposter syndrome, we typically do the opposite, which is to amplify
Okay.
things we may not necessarily be comfortable with because we think that's what got us here. So what gets us here should get us there, but that's not always the case. So I always like to say if your sense of belonging is impacted by imposter syndrome, you want to really stop and ask yourself for beyond the question why, well, what do you think you're in that you're not doing well?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So really trying to dig into like where that sense comes from.
That's exactly. Identify
Mm,
what that is.
mm,
Identify the parts that you've kept hidden
yeah,
and see if there's a disconnect there because
yeah.
imposter syndrome is incredibly difficult to make up. I happen to say, I always joke around that I don't have imposter syndrome because when I was at Penn, they argued so much with me that I felt extremely confident by the time I was
Okay.
done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it doesn't always have to get to that place. And I think the more that we're able to pump ourselves up, especially around imposter syndrome, is incredibly important. So sounds super cheesy, but I'm going to be honest with you.
Mm,
For me, I have a lot of dysmorphia. I don't have workplace dysmorphia. My identity isn't wrapped around my job, but I might have body dysmorphia, or I may have all these different things. And so talking nicer to myself in general
mm,
is what helps me overcome that imposter syndrome in other
okay.
areas of life.
Yeah.
And I always tell people to do it. I get a lot of messages, hilariously enough, where people are like, I just looked at my butt in the mirror and I was like, wow, looking good, girl. Because that's what I do to myself. I don't do that
Yeah.
with my butt. But the rest of me, I'll be like, looking good.
Yeah.
Because eventually I will believe it for myself and it'll be genuine.
Okay. Yeah, that makes us feel better about
It
ourselves.
does.
And
We don't
yeah,
talk
yeah.
very nicely to ourselves.
No,
That
no,
inner voice
definitely
is
not.
loud.
No, no,
Yeah.
no. I think we're our own biggest critics, really.
Yes.
Coming back to this idea, I'm not sure the term you used was it types, the different types of belonging,
Yes. Different types
and
of
this
belonging.
sense of true belonging. Do you think that that is possible? Given, I mean,
Absolutely.
in the workplace, given how we work, and I'd love to explore
Yes.
how that might unfold before we come on to maybe some of the other kind of challenging types of belonging.
Sh- Sure. So I absolutely think that true belonging is achievable. I think it means basically there's things that you have to give up in general, right? So
Mm,
if you're in true belonging, while the majority of that is such a happy, positive feeling, it also means that your sense of self with the company is balanced. That's really hard to achieve. So you're
okay.
not making decisions based on the company only or yourself only. It's it's a balance that you're able to achieve, which brings that positive nature, and that does make it possible. There are challenges with true belonging, just like anything else. One of the biggest things is navigating diverse perspectives.
Mm,
So, true belonging involves embracing diverse perspectives and backgrounds, managing conflicts, sustaining inclusion, and being this ally. And why that sounds like it's harder for true belongers because they're really good the way they are. It's accepting other influences inside that is harder for them.
okay, yeah. And when it comes to this sense of true belonging, you mentioned at the start, but we haven't really explored it that much, this
Sure.
idea of values. Does it all really come down to our values and understanding ourselves really well?
I could argue it both ways, but I'm going to go
Or
with yes.
to
Because,
argue both ways?
yeah.
I'd love to hear both. Yeah.
So for us, our sense of gravity is our moral sensitivity. We are all born with a nature of positivity.
Mm,
And when you're going through that, your personality traits, your characteristics all start to settle into what becomes your values.
okay.
And all day long, your body is almost playing a game of pinball where it's going back and forth. Is this impacting this? Is it, and it's, if it's not, okay, great, I can move on. Is this impacting it? Oh, wait, it is. And it's stopping me from being the person I want. And it puts us in this state of either alignment or misalignment. Misalignment can be very dangerous
Hmm.
because it's important that we're able to stay true to ourselves without feeling like we can, we are giving up part of ourselves, I guess, is what I would
Yeah.
say.
How do we actually find that place where we can show up as we are? How do we know in advance, or is it a case that we can't know in advance where we're going to feel like we belong?
So in the workplace, that's hard because we're all essentially, I always like to look at this as a relationship, right? In the
Hmm.
beginning, it's the wooing stage
Yeah,
where
totally. Yeah.
people are telling us that, these are our values, and you try to align those, right? You're not going to go to a place that outwardly doesn't, that outwardly messes with your sense of integrity, for
Hmm.
example. So I believe that we all go into it with this alignment. And then it's important to understand when that alignment starts to fall apart and if it's things you can live with or things you can't.
Yes.
I often
Okay.
say if
Yeah.
it has you sacrificing who you are, your sense of integrity, then that's a deal breaker.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, what's great about the book is it does dive into the fact of what happens when you're at an impasse, because many of us are, and work still contributes to our livelihood. It's not like we could just quit,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
I'd love to know then when we get to this impasse and we're like, oh, something's not quite right here, and that can happen sooner or that can happen later. What what do you advise for people? Again, given going back to this idea that our job is our livelihood, that's how we make money. And I've
Yeah.
done this myself where I've got to a stage where I'm like, I'm not taking this anymore. And I chose to leave two organizations in, kind of similar circumstances.
So if we find ourselves at an impasse, what you want to do, and there's so many activities in the book that make this easier, but you want to understand your values and what you cannot live without.
Yeah.
Most of the time, you were brought into the workplace again because you like similar values. There's things that you want to aspire to. And what you also need to remember is that the company is the same. If they have aspirational values, we have a major disconnect when they don't actually meet reality.
The question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast, Beth, is what does being happier at work mean to you?
I'm going to stick with the answer around being yourself in a world that tells you to be something different every day.
Yeah.
Being you makes you feel happy in the workplace. There's always this saying around bringing your authentic selves. I always say, instead of bringing your authentic self, bring your best self, because that's
Mm.
really what's going to make you feel good about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I love that. And we have had a conversation previously on the podcast about this idea of your authentic self. And it's like you can't bring your authentic self because you're not showing up in the same way to work as you
Right.
would do, say, with family members.
Yeah.
People want to find out more about the book. Where can they do that? What's the best way they can do that? Or if they want
Sure.
to reach out to you to connect and find out more about what you do, what's the best way they can do that?
Thank you. The best way to find out more is drbethkaplan.com, or you can go on LinkedIn. I'm there. You can find me. I also run a group called Belonging at Work. It's also on Instagram. You can find me. Tons of different ways to get in touch. I always like to say, don't be a stranger. We're all in this together.